Ken Liu said this in his story, The Grace of Kings, book number 1, The Dandelion Dynasty. Old friends are like old clothes. They fit the best. Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads, where today we are doing another video in my Why You Should Read series, and we are talking about why you should read Ken Liu. Ken Liu is one of the authors that I have grown to really enjoy over the course of the last year, and I've always kind of prided myself and kind of challenged myself when it comes to this specific series, Why You Should Read. I didn't want to do a Why You Should Read on an author that I've only read a very small sample of their overarching works. Obviously, Ken Liu hasn't written a ton of works, but what I have read, and I'm only down to his last Dandelion Dynasty book, has all been great. So I have been looking forward to this for quite some time. Let's dive right in and let's talk about author Ken Liu. So Ken Liu was born in 1976. He is from Lanzhou, China, and he moved to the United States at the age of 11. He lived with his grandparents for a while in California before moving to Connecticut, and he had lived in Stonington, Connecticut, growing up in high school before moving away to attend college. Ken Liu has written 2 short story collections, 4 novels, all in the Dandelion Dynasty, his epic fantasy series, and he has several translated works, most famously being his translated works for the Three-Body Problem that he helped translate with author Chen Liu. And so he also, I didn't know this either, he also wrote a Star Wars novel, The Legends of Luke Skywalker, which I'll put a picture up of here. In terms of copies of books sold, and I like to talk about this about every author, it's in the millions. I don't have an exact count when it comes to Ken Liu as an author, but it's in the millions. In terms of genres, he writes predominantly in fantasy, sci-fi. He also writes in a subgenre that I talked about in one of my Dandelion Dynasty reviews. He coined the phrase silk punk as a kind of subgenre, happened to do with Chinese inventions and using different tapestries and silk and modern bamboo to do inventions, and he coined the phrase silk punk as a genre or subgenre. In terms of awards, he's won several different awards, been nominated multiple times for a Nebula, a Hugo, and World Fantasy Worlds awards, but he has also won a Nebula, a Hugo, and a World Fantasy Award for his works. Some unique, cool facts about Ken Liu. His first published work was a story about mind uploading, which he published in 2002, and it was titled Carthaginian Rose, and it was published in Phobos Sci-Fi magazine along with some other authors. I thought that was really interesting. His mom is a pharmaceutical chemist, and his father is a computer scientist, which I thought was really interesting. Liu has spoken at conferences and universities on topics such as futurism, machine augmentation, creativity, AI, and the history of technology. And I was very blessed to actually listen to him speak and give a lecture while getting a book signed. Yes, I know that's not why I'm doing this one, but I did and really enjoy his discussion about AI and the arts. His short story, Good Hunting, was adapted into an episode of Netflix animated series Love, Death, and Robots. Liu and his family moved to Connecticut as a child. He graduated high school in Stonington, Connecticut, and attended and graduated from Harvard and studied English Lit and computer science. Liu also holds a law degree from Harvard, and after graduating worked for Microsoft for many years and then started his own startup company before moving back to the Boston, Massachusetts area. Liu holds a law degree from Harvard, and he has also been a corporate litigator, which I thought was really interesting. And he does a lot of translations, and we'll talk about that. Several of his short stories from the collection, The Hidden Girl, and other short stories, can be found on Pantheon, which is an adult animated sci-fi series on AMC. Before becoming a full-time writer in 2005, Liu worked as a software engineer, a corporate lawyer, and a litigation consultant. That's pretty crazy to drop all of those fields to go write. You definitely have to have a passion for it, and it shows in his work. Liu and his family reside around the Boston, Massachusetts area. Most notably, he's famous for helping translate many works, most famously The Three-Body Problem with Liu Cixin, as well as his own version that he translated of the Tao Te Ching regarding Taoism. And he did so during the COVID pandemic when he got inspired by what was taking place there. He decided to do his own translation of the Tao Te Ching. He has helped translate over 12 different works in his career thus far, and he also helps by speaking at libraries and universities about AI, other technological influences, and their place in the future. Liu's wife, Lisa, is a photographist and was actually a writer herself before becoming a full-time mother and supporting Liu as a writer. So why Ken Liu? What makes him a really good author? Obviously, I've got some recency bias because I just started reading Liu in the last year. I do have my own thoughts about where you should start, and we'll get into that. But in terms of author and chops and why he's good, I think he does a great job with character work. He writes masterfully when it comes to creating emotions and characters directly and indirectly. I think he is one of the best in terms of writing setting. I think plotting is one of his weaker points, I will say, and I say that based on what I've read 3 out of the 4 books in the Dandelion Dynasty thus far. I think plotting is one of the areas he could do better on. But in terms of setting, in terms of characters, in terms of emotions, in terms of providing you and putting you in these scenes that he creates, he does a masterful job of that. I think his writing is very matter of fact. I think he can be technical and wordy at times, but I think at the same time, if you stick with him, I think the payoffs down the road are very, very well worth it. I think pacing is another area too, where I think what you give up in the short term, you get paid in dividends in the long term when it comes to pacing. He can be a tad slow at times, but I think there's a purpose and a reason behind it, especially when I'm talking about the Dandelion Dynasty. I think some of those books, I mean, they're big, big books, but there's a purpose of those stories and what's being written. I don't think there's a lot of fluff. I just think he takes his time and gets there on his own accord. So where do you start when it comes to Ken Liu and reading? Obviously, he hasn't written 50 books, so you can narrow it down pretty easy. I don't think reading any of his Dandelion Dynasty books are where you should enter Ken Liu, and that's not where I entered as well. I think your best bets are enter in one of these 2 of his short story collections. I think these are the best entry to really showcase Ken Liu's writing ability. It's lower on the investment totem pole, so to speak, and I think they're both great entry points. This is how I experienced Ken Liu and gave him a shot. I started with The Paper Menagerie. I was very enamored. I found this at a used bookstore for next to nothing. It is actually signed. Yes, I know. I've talked about this ad nauseum. It is a signed edition. I got him to sign this for me. But both of these editions really, in my opinion, short stories are where it's at when it comes to Ken Liu and his ability to write. I think some of the plot and characters work in this are so flippin' good. You definitely want to check these out, so you can't go wrong. So with that being said, I think first and foremost, short stories, I think, are where it's at. If you're a huge epic fantasy person, I think you can go right into the Dandelion Dynasty and you'll be at home. I think it'll be like something that you probably have never come across before. When I read quite a few fantasy trilogies series in my time, the Dandelion Dynasty probably is one of those ones that I've never come across before. When you're talking about Chinese history and its place, and It's just unlike anything I've ever read. In terms of recommendations with these two short stories, when you're talking to Paper Menagerie, I think the Ultimate Story, The Paper Menagerie, is one of the great ones in this one. I think The Waves is another great short story. There's one called The Brief History of the Trans-Pacific Tunnel, and then there's one titled Mono No Aware. I think those are 4 great ones in this collection. In this collection, The Hidden Girl and Other Stories, I think you can't go wrong with. There's 3 stories I call the God stories, and they're not titled that, but there's the word God is in the stories, and they're loosely connected, and it has to do with basically a singularity. But you definitely should check those out. I think the others are Thoughts and Prayers is another good one. The Message is another good one. And then one I really was just shocked because the name kind of throws you, but it's a really good one, is Gray Rabbit, Crimson Mare, and Coal Leopard is another great one in this collection. Overall, my overall thoughts about Ken Liu as an author, I think he is a master storyteller. I think he is one of those authors that embraces this technological change in AI that we're coming on into its younger years about, and what it's going to mean in terms of the arts down the road. But I like his writing and how he goes about telling a story. I think his short stories are definitely where you should take off on. If you are a huge hardcore epic fantasy lover, I think you can dive right into the Dandelion Dynasty, and it's going to be unlike anything you've ever read. I think he is an underrated author. I think I will say that. He is completely underrated. And again, I think his short stories are just the best. That is my take for this episode of Why You Should Read Ken Liu. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you get something from it. And I will talk to you all on the next one. Thanks.
3, 2, 1.